Welcome to Reaching Out. I'm Gregory Floyd, President Local 237 Teamsters. Today, our very special guest is community activist Sondra Youdelman. She is the Executive Director of Community Voices Heard. Sondra, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Now, before I begin, we're going to ask you, who are Community Voices Heard and how did you get started? But I really want to say that I know that you're the most vocal and active community activist group in New York State. Why do I say that? It's because you chased down the group called Committee to Save New York, and I believe it was you who exposed who was on the committee and what they were doing.
Well, I appreciate your comments. We like to think of ourselves as one of the most active and vocal groups here in the state. Community Voices Heard was started back in 1994 by a group of women receiving public assistance who were frustrated at that point in time with the national debate going on about welfare reform. And they felt that this debate stereotyped women on welfare, particularly women of color, in a way that didn't meet their realities, and that the discussions of both who they were and what solutions needed to happen to address poverty didn't meet the real needs of the people. So this group of women got together back in 1994 and said enough is enough, and we ourselves need to be at the decision-making tables around our issues. So they formed Community Voices Heard, an organization of low-income people, low-income families working together to build power in New York State for low-income people, with a particular emphasis on women of color and bringing the voices of low-income people into the policy debates that affect their lives.
Now, you have so many projects going on in New York City and also New York State. What are some of those projects that you're working on right now?
Sure. We have sort of 4 different areas of work that we focus on currently. One of them is around jobs and access to jobs, and another is around welfare and workforce development and ensuring a social safety net that's secure for low-income families. And then we have work around participatory democracy that I can speak a little bit more of, and then our work around revenue raising and really making sure that there are resources for the critical programs that low-income families need in the state. That's the work that's actually tapped into the Committee to Save New York. But that's just one area of what we work on. So going a little bit deeper into it, around jobs and welfare reform, one of our biggest campaigns is really fighting to end the work experience program, which is an unpaid work program for welfare recipients when they're mandated to work off their paychecks. Mandated to work off their welfare checks. And what we've been fighting for is that welfare recipients that are working for the city actually get paychecks. So that's a really big campaign. They should
actually get paid the wage that they're working in their profession.
Exactly. They should get paid just like the union workers that are right side by side with them.
Sure.
And we really think it's important that those unpaid workers are not displacing union workers, but that we're building up a bigger quality workforce that's paid with the dignity that they deserve for the work that they're doing.
They should have the salary and benefits for all, equal work for equal pay.
Exactly.
Yes.
Another set of campaign issues we work around, like I said, is public and affordable housing. Here in New York City, that tends to focus on public housing and making sure that we're preserving it and maintaining it as a critical affordable housing stock here in the city for low-income families. We have a number of different aspects of that campaign, one around improving repairs and maintenance of public housing, one around trying to fight for decision-making power of public housing residents around how resources are spent in public housing, and another around jobs and access to them, focusing on the enforcement of a federal regulation that says that some of the jobs around capital improvements should really go to residents themselves. So that's some of the public housing work that we're doing. Around participatory democracy, we are the lead community engagement group here in New York City that started the participatory budgeting process in the last cycle that a lot of folks have heard about. We had 4 city council members participate in the last cycle, and we're looking to double that in the next cycle.
Which 4 members?
So the pioneering members were council members Melissa Mark Viverito.
I thought she would be there.
Brad Lander.
Okay.
Jumani Williams.
Yes.
And Eric Ulrich.
Okay.
And the 4 of them set aside at least $1 million of their capital discretionary funds to a process that would let the residents in their communities decide how it would be spent on a public ballot. It was a multi-month process that included lots of community residents and stakeholders in defining the needs in their community, and then culminated with about 6,000 people voting at the end of the process in how they wanted the budget money to be spent. And this is the kind of model that we think should be scaled up to really address larger city issues and look at the discretionary resources in the overall city budget and how people can prioritize where that money goes, rather than a very small select group of people determining, particularly those that are sort of paying to have their opinions advanced, where the money goes.
Joining me now will be Agnes Rivera, the co-chair of the Board of Directors for Community Voices Heard. How did you become involved in Community Voices Heard?
I became involved with Community Voices Heard through the public housing campaign, and it was at that time that NYCHA put up this big thing that they're going to be charging us $65 for changing the sockets and all. And my first impression was actually the senior citizens and how would they pay for it or so. And I was really, really angry, and a organizer came to my door, knocked on my door, and then I shouted at him. His name is David Dodge. I was screaming at him, and then I had to just stop and say, oh my goodness, you're not the person. So I actually welcomed him into my home, and then we talked about Community Voices Heard.
Was this in 2008?
Yes. In 2000 and the ending of 5, beginning of 6.
And then $65 a light socket.
Yes.
Wow. That is something. You have been involved in several campaigns, one on welfare reform and also efforts to end the WEP programs. Please tell us about those campaigns.
Well, I support that campaign because it's one of the committees that we have. We have members that are actually on it because they're going through the process. But we also have people that live in public housing and are in the WEP campaign, so we share the people together. I think that it's great if we could really get what we need in order to support that movement for the people, which is transitional jobs. And I know very specifically that they do want to have jobs to support their families.
Now, your campaign has provided some connection to a larger audience. And just the other segment, Sondra mentioned a campaign in Charlotte, North Carolina, where some of the community voices had their voices heard, and you went to a shareholders meeting and you confronted Jamie Dimon, and there was an exchange, and we'd like to hear about the exchange and his reaction.
One of the things that I could say, I went in there with some of the other members, and I went as a public housing representative. And yes, I was at that Charlotte, North Carolina meeting. It was actually exciting. I really wanted to be in the outside with making the noise. But it was very, very interesting. And there were people there who were truly stockholders who were actually complaining of what was going on with their stock. And they felt that they needed to be out there with the 99%. And his voice was actually shocking. He answered nothing. He answered nothing at all. So he was saying what I usually hear when I go, oh, please, and don't get offended.
No, I'm not going to get offended.
All right. When I go to the NYCHA hearings, you always hear Rhea saying, well, I have some of my representatives here, they'll take your complaint. And that's exactly what he was doing. He was telling people to go to the back, give them their number, and somebody would call them, that they're doing the best they can. That was all he would say.
And was that before the announcement that they lost $2 billion, and it could be $10 billion, and it could be hundreds of billions of dollars?
Yes, that was way before that, and I don't believe anybody loses that much money. I could lose $40, and my kids will complain to me and say,
somebody
where
has
did
it.
you? Yeah. So how do you lose that amount of money that you have an oversight of? You cannot lie to the people anymore. I think they need to stop pulling the leg on the people, because the people are really, really bright. And when you have organizations out there that are actually showing them and teaching them and guiding them and to see and read between the lines, then you got to start stepping up your game and actually helping and supporting the people.
I'm Gregory Floyd, President Local 237 Teamsters. Our very special guest, for this segment was Agnes Rivera, the co-chair of the Board of Directors for Community Voices Heard. And prior to that, we had Sondra Youdelman, who is Executive Director of Community Voices Heard. Thank you both.
Thank you.